Eleanor was a 66-year-old woman with grey hair and hazel eyes that conveyed wisdom acquired over the years. Widowed for 10 years, she maintained a peaceful routine in her suburban home in a small town. Her greatest pleasure was Sunday lunches with her family, especially with her son Philippe, daughter-in-law Sabine, and her 2 beloved grandchildren, 8-year-old Marcus and 5-year-old Sophia. Philippe, at 42, was a successful businessman in the technology sector. Tall, with broad shoulders and an easy smile, he had inherited his mother's expressive eyes. From a young age, he demonstrated an entrepreneurial spirit that led him to build his own company from scratch. Sabine, his wife of 10 years, was an elegant 38-year-old woman with brown hair and a sweet yet determined personality. With a degree in administration, she had left her career to dedicate herself to the family and help Philippe in his ventures. The couple lived in a spacious house in an upscale neighborhood of the city. The 2-story residence was tastefully decorated, filled with modern furniture and contemporary artwork. The well-maintained garden was Sabine's pride, and she loved spending Saturday afternoons among the colorful flowers. A few weeks ago, Eleanor noticed a change in her son's and daughter-in-law's behavior. The phone calls became shorter and more spaced out, and the Sunday lunches were cancelled with vague excuses. Knowing her son well, she knew that something was not right. Philippe had always been transparent with his emotions, incapable of hiding when something was bothering him. Concerned about the prolonged silence, Eleanor decided to make a surprise visit. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, she took a taxi to her son's house. Her heart was racing as she approached the familiar gate. Upon arriving, she noticed an unusual silence. She clapped her hands, but no one answered. However, suddenly she heard raised voices coming from inside the house. Eleanor rang the doorbell, feeling her anxiety grow. After a few moments, the door opened, revealing Marcus, her oldest grandson. The boy, usually cheerful and talkative, was downcast, his eyes red as if he'd been crying recently. "Is everything okay, dear?" Eleanor asked, the concern evident in her voice. Marcus just nodded silently, opening the door wider for his grandmother to enter. What Eleanor saw left her stunned. The house, once so cozy and well decorated, was practically empty. Only a sofa, a TV on the wall, and some basic kitchen utensils remained. It was as if a whirlwind had passed through, taking all signs of comfort and stability away. In the center of the room, Philippe was standing, his eyes brimming with tears. Upon seeing his mother, his face showed surprise and embarrassment. "Mum, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. Eleanor, still trying to process the scene before her, replied calmly, "You weren't answering the phone. I was worried. What's happening, son?" Before Philippe could answer, they heard hurried footsteps coming down the stairs. It was Sabine, her face marked by tears, her hair disheveled. "Philippe, please don't go," she pleaded, noticing the suitcases beside her husband. The tension in the air was palpable. Eleanor looked around, noticing Sophia's absence. "Where is the little one?" she asked, trying to remain calm. "She's asleep in the room," Marcus replied quietly, speaking for the first time since his grandmother's arrival. Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation. Just a month ago, everything seemed perfect. Philippe was speaking excitedly about his projects, the children's achievements, and plans for the future. What could have happened to change everything so drastically? With all the wisdom of her years, Eleanor decided not to meddle directly. "You need to calm down and talk," she said firmly. "Things cannot be resolved in this state." Sabine, still crying, asked if Eleanor could take the children to her house. "They don't need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. Eleanor readily agreed. In a few minutes she left with Marcus and Sophia, who had woken up from the commotion. On the way to her house she tried to calm the children, promising that everything would be all right, even though her own heart was tight with worry. Once at home, after putting the grandchildren to sleep, Eleanor sat in her favourite armchair, her thoughts far away. The pain of seeing her son and his family going through that situation was almost physical. She couldn't understand how a marriage that seemed so solid could have reached that point. In silence, she prayed, asking God to bring peace and clarity to Philippe and Sabine, that they would find a way to resolve their issues, for their sake and for the children's sake. Hours later, the phone rang. It was Philippe. "Mum, can I come to your house? Stay for a while until things between Sabine and me get resolved," he asked, his voice tired. The question took Eleanor by surprise. Her son, always so independent and successful, asking to return to his mother's house? Something really serious must have happened, but she knew that wasn't the solution. "No, Philippe," she replied firmly. "I don't know why you're asking me this, but my answer is no." There was a silence on the other end of the line. Then, the words began to flow. Philippe talked about the process his company was facing, an unfair accusation that threatened everything he had built. Debts accumulated, assets were seized. The financial stress turned into constant arguments with Sabine. Harsh words were exchanged, accusations made in the heat of the moment. They had been hiding it for months. Eleanor listened to everything with a heavy heart but remained firm. "Son, I know you're suffering, but since you got married, these issues are yours to resolve. I can't interfere." Philippe was silent for a few seconds, digesting his mother's words. Finally, he murmured a "thank you" before hanging up. The next day, Eleanor decided to call Sabine. Her daughter-in-law's voice sounded shaky when she answered. "How are things over there? Have you managed to calm down a bit?" Eleanor asked gently. Sabine burst into tears, pouring out all the frustrations and fears of the past few months. Eleanor just listened, offering the understanding silence Sabine so badly needed at that moment. "He's not like that," Sabine sobbed. "It doesn't make sense to let these things affect our marriage." Eleanor felt her heart tighten with the despair in her daughter-in-law's voice. Calmly, she began to speak. "Sabine, dear, I know how much you love each other. Remember how it all started, what brought you together. Marriage is a daily decision to make it work. Divorce should not be the first option. It only brings more pain and resentment." Eleanor's words seemed to calm Sabine. The wisdom of a woman who had lived through a long and happy marriage, now a widow, weighed heavily. That night, after putting the children to bed, Sabine looked for Philippe. She found him sitting on the couch in the almost empty living room, his gaze lost. "Philippe," she began softly, "I talked to your mother today." He looked at her, surprised. "What she said made me think a lot," Sabine continued. "I've decided that I want to try again. I've thought about everything we've been through all these years, and I believe we can have a happy marriage. I don't want the divorce." Sabine's words struck Philippe like lightning. Suddenly it was as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. All the problems, the frustration, the fall he had suffered, all of this had wounded him deeply, but he was channeling this pain toward the wrong people. "Oh, Sabine," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry. For everything." The two embraced, tears running freely. In an emotional conversation, they asked each other for forgiveness for all the harsh words, for all the moments of weakness. They decided to face the challenges together, as a team. In the days that followed, Philippe and Sabine worked together to rebuild not just their relationship, but their lives as well. Philippe faced the lawsuit against his company with renewed determination, relying on Sabine's unconditional support. Gradually, the debts were paid off, and they started to redecorate the house, transforming it once again into a welcoming home. Eleanor watched from afar, her heart full of joy to see her family recovering. She knew that her decision not to interfere directly, but to offer words of wisdom at the right moment, had been crucial to this reconciliation. Weeks later, the Sunday lunch at Eleanor's house resumed. The table was laden with food, laughter and lively conversations. Philippe and Sabine exchanged knowing glances, their hands entwined under the table. Marcus and Sophia ran through the garden, their laughter echoing through the house. Eleanor observed the scene with a serene smile. She knew the challenges weren't over. Life would always bring new obstacles. But she also knew that her family was now stronger, more united to face whatever came their way. That afternoon, while everyone was helping to clean the kitchen, Philippe approached his mother. "Thank you, Mom," he said simply, hugging her. Eleanor returned the hug, tears of happiness in her eyes. No more words were needed. She understood the silent gratitude for her wisdom, for her unconditional love, for knowing when to help and when to let them find their own way. That moment crystallized a profound truth. The power of love, understanding, and wisdom can overcome even the most difficult trials. And sometimes the most powerful way to help is simply to be present, offer kind words at the right moment, and trust that those we love will find their way back home. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.